Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Physician Wealth Med podcast. We like to say it's wealth medicine for doctors, and we've got some great wealth medicine for you here today. Talk about a lot of things regarding strategic planning for your practice. It's an honor to have Dr. Evan Duke with us here today, so welcome.
Thank you very much, Kevin. My name is Evan Duke, and I am a fractional COO, VP of Operations. I know the concept of fractional is relatively new, so just to clarify that, basically it's a really fancy term for saying I would work part-time as a COO or a VP of Operations. My practice really focuses on helping business owners, really of all shapes and sizes, when it comes time for them to prepare for exiting their business. Now, exiting is a challenging thing. It takes a lot of time. I've seen estimates between 3 to 5 years. And even while I like to say I feel like I can get it closer to the 3 years, let's just do a little quick exercise here. Since 2020, in the last 5 years, we had the remains of a pandemic, actually the bulk of the pandemic, basically in the last 5 years. We've had war in the Ukraine, we've had tariffs, we've had a lot of things in 5 years that could potentially derail a sale. Now, that'd be more industry specific with some, but really the point I'm making is it's a hard process. And even if we have everything really pretty close to going, something could get in and mess it up. So that's why, it's recommended 3 to 5 years. Now, I have done work that was similar to what I do now, really the last decade or so of my career. I've worked in a wide range of industries, everything from manufacturing and servicing to nonprofits. I actually started out as a musician, as a trumpet player. So I just have a wide range of backgrounds as far as experience in industries. And I'm just really excited to assist anybody, just because I've been in situations where exits don't go according to plan, and I want to help people out, make sure that does not happen to them.
You mean to tell me there are bumps along the road that would thwart an exit plan or an exit strategy along the way?
Yeah, and you never know. Sometimes things could go smoothly, other times sometimes it may be the things that you least expect. It's anybody's guess what could happen. And that's what makes it exciting, but also forces you to stay on your toes.
Yeah, as far as exit planning goes too, those are headline risks. Those are massive headline risks that you have. A lot of times I think doctors who own medical practices that make them business owners, the combination, that's the forte of who we serve. But I think that we don't look at it like that, to say those external things could really play a part in an exit strategy. And if you're more proactive versus reactive, that's what it's all about. And where this is your lifeline, that you've built all your years of working, all your professional thoughts and everything has gone into this work, sweat equity, and everything that goes with it. You want to make sure that you've got all of the dots and all your T's crossed.
Exactly. And what makes this harder is the fact that let's say you've been in the business for 30 years, and some of the things we may talk about a little later, you may have already done some of these things. Well, if you did it 10, 15, 20 years ago, things change. circumstances change.
Yeah.
Really, you've got to be willing to go back and visit and think, that was fine 20 years ago. That doesn't work for where we are today.
Great point. I mean, one of the things we tell doctors, our main mission is to help you build wealth inside and outside of your practice. And so many physicians get so bogged down in the daily grind and find it very hard to break away to work on their practice versus just in it. I like some of the things that you said earlier in our notes back and forth that we'll bring up here in just a minute. But when you really look at what you're trying to do, if you know, and if you got your goals straight, and if you have a roadmap to where you want to go, everything you do could be making your practice more valuable along the way, and you could say yes to all the right things that matter and no to everything else. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Let's talk a little bit about the basics. I know we have a rough outline here that we wanted to cover, but let's just talk about addressing the basics, whether you're in a partnership or not. You wrote here, from buy-sell agreements to determining partnership stakes, it's crucial that the fundamental decisions like this get made right away, even if nothing happens to anyone in ownership. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, the first thing I guess it's kind of ironic. In my beginning was my end. I'll start with the ending of that. Nothing happens to anyone in ownership. That's a legitimate possibility that nothing might happen for 25, 30, maybe even 40 years. I mean, I've been in situations where nothing seemed to happen. And then I've also been in situations and really watched what happens when all of a sudden, circumstances take control of the situation and a person leaves. And actually, really, one situation with an organization I was with was very similar to this, where the rest of the leadership team really didn't think about the importance of getting things worked out, planning ahead, about succession planning. The results when people in certain positions left, they were rather catastrophic. And really, what I would advocate in this case is, you may think everything's fine. You're in the best of health. Everyone's in the best of health. Circumstances change. So that's why we do it. Is we don't do it because, okay, somebody's getting ready to leave. We don't do it because things are going badly. We do it because you don't know what tomorrow may bring. So that's that point. And then really the buy-sell agreements, I'll make a point here quickly on this and then turn it back to you, Kevin. But the idea there with buy-sell agreements or partnership stakes, aka determining, not all partnerships are 50-50. Some partners might have more invested than others. A buy-sell agreement, what's going to happen, and basically get the scenarios figured out. I speak broadly for the simple reason that while these are rather general concepts, there are situations that once you get into your circumstance, they're going to get very specific very fast. And they're great starting points. And I say starting points because once you get started, you'll very quickly see what else you need to do. But just simply getting started, and that's sometimes the hardest thing, but getting started is imperative.
Yeah, it's all part of that continuity planning that you have. I've often heard it said you can be certain that something uncertain is going to happen in your career. And that's the reason for it. It's like you don't see these things. Sometimes you say, well, is it worth it to work with this person or that professional? But they're there to help you see things that you don't see right now. Those unseen things that could really disrupt business flow. Buy-sell agreements are so important in a partnership or any type of ownership to make sure that you take control over those things should something happen. I've had at least 5 years working with that when I first started my career in the buy-sell agreement world. And it was just quite interesting to see, people that didn't take the time to plan and the horror stories that go with that. It doesn't matter if it's a manufacturing company or if it's just a small mom and pop with two partners. When someone passes away or becomes disabled and they cannot perform the functions that they used to do, or especially in a death case, you don't want to go into business with the partner's spouse that might not have that kind of same expertise, and especially in the medical field, that don't carry a medical license, who are not a physician. How can they help in those realms? So these are very important concepts to nail down when you're looking at the health of your practice, because it's what you don't see that could thwart your plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's huge on the buy sell thing. And we could do a whole podcast just on that. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot in there. But, if you remember anything, key people in your organization, that if something happened to them, that your whole practice would be completely disrupted should they not be able to show up on Monday morning. And every day, we get notifications on our phone all the time of things that happen to good people that weren't expecting it. And we get it from all over the country. So being proactive is huge. Let's talk to the next point that you had, like strategic planning. Where is everything going? You said at some level, everyone does strategic planning, but all too often it focuses on what we want as opposed to what is practical or how we get there. So focus on questions. Where do you realistically want to be, and how do you plan to get there? Speak to that for a second.
Okay, well, this is something that I've seen in multiple organizations. As far as I've seen it go wrong, but at the same time, I've tried to direct programs to help make sure we get where we need to go. The first part of that question about where do you realistically want to be, a lot of that is going to be dictated by, financial projections. One thing that I like to do is at the very beginning of my process is to get about 5 years worth of financials and study them. And then using that, develop a forecast for the next 5 years. We'd be able to get a look at trends. We'd be able to see basically where things are going. And it could give us some room for study, thinking, okay, well, we see the expenses are trending this direction. Maybe we could approaches by focusing on maybe adjusting certain areas that maybe bring them more in line with something that would be better. But admittedly, that's, kind of pre-strategic planning. It's an important part of the process because it gives us an idea about where the cash flow and really everything is going financially. So that way we can figure out what kind of working capital we're going to need for the second part. And that is, when it comes to figuring out where you want to go, you're going to need to have a list of needs as well as, maybe nice to haves. I know some people might think, okay, a list of needs or wants to have, that might be assets like equipment. Not necessarily. It could be like you're looking and thinking, okay, your business is growing to the point you may need to think about expanding your HR department, adding multiple roles. You may need to think about on the billing side, okay, we'll have to do some adjustments. Just basically, there are numbers of variables here. It's different things that we could go, okay, well, let's adjust this, let's fix that. But the point is, you're developing this list of things that you realize needs to happen in order to get to where you want to be. Now, the beauty of getting this list of everything, whether it be new hires or new equipment, is once you get that and you kind of get a price tag on what all that's going to be, then you come back to your projections and you begin to think, okay, this is what we really need to get here. This is where things are trending. And then the strategic planning is trying to think, okay, let's take this and figure out what we can accomplish. And that's really, in my mind, how you would successfully strategically plan. And it's there, yes, granted, there is some dreaming, thinking big. It's like, okay, let's get this and that. But at the same time, we need to come up with a strategy. And the best way you can do that is figure out, okay, how are we doing financially and where are we heading?
Right. And there's really no substitute for financials, having great financials that you can go to at a moment's notice. It is so imperative to have good financials there, because I always say that not knowing where you're at, everybody needs to know where they're at so that you have a baseline so you know where you're going. And then you can take it from there. And as you take those key indicators that come out of this review, you can use those for areas of growth moving forward, which all ties back into making your practice more valuable over time. Just because you want to be successful, it doesn't mean you're planning on exiting the business now, but as you go and as you grow, you can use those things to make your practice much more efficient and more valuable. And it also gives you like a pecking order, if I'm not mistaken, right? The way you were kind of looking at that, it's like, here's what you'd like to have done, but strategically with the cash flow that you have, let's knock this one out first. Let's do this one second, kind of thing.
Exactly. Right? And I remember one organization I did a capital campaign for, it was actually a nonprofit, is I talked with the staff and asked, okay, what are things that we could use? And I think wound up being like 3 to 4 years worth of equipment. And we're like, okay, well, let's knock out this year. Then next year's like, okay, let's try to get this. And so sometimes, like to your point, prioritizing, thinking, okay, what do we need now? And what would be, okay, once we get this, what's the next step? So definitely establishing a pecking order would be crucial, because the reality is some people might be like, okay, well, I need to get all of this stuff done now. Well, you can't do it all now. You're going to have to spread things out.
Right. Even if you could get it done now and have all things now, it's the time and attention needed for each one of those little pieces that you have to devote to it to make it grow and make it work. The resources, the people, the talent, the time, the resources, but then you have to be spreading yourself too thin. And in many cases, doctors who own medical practices that make them business owners, who's got the time to circle back around all the time to do that? Do it well, do it one thing at a time, but do it well. And that would just improve your psyche as you go through this whole exercise anyway.
Absolutely.
Anything else you have to say on that subject?
Well, I guess the only thing I might want to add is, and really, you made a really good point about the fact that you're working and all these additions, and they're nice to have, but let's stop and think about it. If you're trying to get all of this work done, but you're not focusing on your bread and butter, you're going to have a problem. So really, that's another thing as well, just really the pacing mentality. And another thing that's worth noting is with another nonprofit that I directed, I realized very quickly that when it came to additions, 1 to 2 new things, and when I say new, I mean new on a big level, that's pretty much all you should do in a year, because not only you're trying to figure it out, but you're trying to figure out how everything's going to work together. So there's a lot of value to, getting it planned, but, taking your time and not trying to rush it, because if you do things too quickly, I think it's, I forget who it was who said, but basically too many chefs spoil the broth. In other words, you do too much too fast, things may not go well.
That's it. And if I can translate that into my own Italian household, they let this Irish guy into the Italian family, so we would just substitute broth for sauce. Yes, we're still one of those families that meet every single Sunday at 3:00 and have sauce and meatballs and all that stuff. So, I mean, you can't replace that. I always tell people we ought to have our own reality TV show. We have enough content for everybody. But yeah, that's a true statement. Let's go to this next one. How valuable is your business? To determine how valuable your business is, you need to ask yourself how valuable you are to it. Oh, I couldn't wait to get to this point, because this is so true. This is reality, folks. If you're a doctor listening to this right now, this is so true. If the answer is you are extremely valuable and it cannot function without you, you have a business that has very limited value. And it's almost worth repeating, but I'll let you take it from here.
And, I understand really why you emphasize why it's worth repeating, because let's face it, everyone goes into a line of work because we like it. I'm sure there are many medical professionals out there who went there because they want to help people. I know I've talked with many doctors. I've had the privilege of having some wonderful friends. In fact, a very dear friend of mine who passed away a few weeks ago had a
Mm.
very long career as a medical professional. And my impression is that there are many, many wonderful people in this field who truly want to help people.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't realize that while, okay, yeah, we love this and we enjoy this work, the problem is when you create a business, you know, businesses, it's not about necessarily, okay, you love doing it. Like, I don't know of anybody who decided to go into a profession saying, hey, I want to go into this profession just so I can create a business. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work that way. But the way that it works is if we have something like a business that is valuable, we need to make probably one of the hardest decisions of our career professional. And that is realize that while we got into this profession because we love it, we need to realize that if we want to have some value with this business, we need to find a way to step back and not be as integral to that business's operations. Because if you're trying to sell a business and you are absolutely integral to it, nobody wants to buy it. And the reason why is because a buyer is going to look at it and go, well, what happens when you walk away from that business?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a hard lesson. And I know for me, that's always been a hard lesson, regardless of where my job has been, because I love a lot of the work that I do. But
Mm-hmm.
realizing that, once you have something where you can actually step away for even say 6 months and come back and it is still operating and is providing really good, not only cash flow, but also the balance sheet is looking nice. That is a very
Mm.
valuable business.
Absolutely. If not, we always said you own a job. You've worked so hard to own yourself a job. Because if you're so valuable and we pull you out, will those patients come with the new owner kind of thing? It all comes into play when that's going on. But if you can see that, I liked what you said, and just step back a little bit and could your business run 6 months without you? To be the owner of the business with your name and mentorship in it, which is very important, that you could pour your life into someone else to bring them on board to help your business grow. You could step away and have it still run and still be as productive as you would like to be. But it just takes on a different life of its own when you look at it that way. If you want to scale and if you want to grow, if you don't scale, you die. If you don't grow, you die. A flat line is not good in the medical world because you're dead. The line that goes up and down, it might be volatile, but yeah, at least there's life there. So that's a great point. Any other thing you want to talk on that?
Well, the one other thing I do want to mention is I do realize that there are some businesses by nature, we would refer to them as lifestyle businesses, that it is essentially a glorified job. I know
Mhm.
financial advisors who have their own book of business. There are some just because of the way they are. Um, it really is more of a job as opposed to a business. And I've talked with some. In fact, I think of one colleague of mine who's in Canada who he does work very similar to what I do. He's like, I admit it, what I do is a lifestyle business, but I am happy with that. I have
Mhm.
no problems. And really to say that, a business like this, while it is hard to sell, it is not impossible. You're not going to get nearly what value you think you might. And at the end of the day, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it being there. But on the
Mhm.
flip side, if you can actually move it away from that and actually turn it into a business that actually is sellable for a really good price, and that's at the end of the day, that's, I would say, a lot of the businesses out there.
Right.
It's not, I mean, there are going to be lifestyle businesses that just because of their very nature, they need to be that way. But
Mhm.
most businesses don't need to be that way.
Yeah. And a lot of the wealth that they have, the personal wealth, is wrapped up in the business, in the value of their business. And a lot of times they don't know what the value of their business is along the way. But how do you know if you don't have a baseline? So I would suggest that you at least take that next step to find out what the value of your business is and some of those key things that come out of that to help you grow your business along the way. And you can also work on your personal wealth that lasts for generations, but at least you'll know what the value is in your business, which is huge. And I like that too, lifestyle business, because you are the face, you are the caring person, you are the one with the knowledge, and they got that patient in the first place. That patient came to see you in the first place because, you know, so you want to make sure you take care of them, but also have some value to your business as well. How about this last one here? What am I up against in trying to exit my business with 70% of sales failing? The typical M&A transaction takes 9 months, and it takes 1 to 2 years to just get an average business ready to sell. The deck is stacked against you. You kind of alluded to this as we started the podcast, but getting started at least 5 years prior to exiting, your odds are much more favorable. Go ahead and speak to that. Just maybe if there's any other comments that you have on that.
Well, really, where we are headed is it's going to be, I'd say the odds are even worse. Ironically, that 70% about a decade ago was closer to 80%. So in many ways, things have actually gotten better. Mm-hmm. The reason I say that I think it's going to be a little harder is I have an M&A advisor that I talk with regularly. In fact, we actually talked this morning, had about an hour-long chat. And one thing that we've been discussing is the reality that last year was the final year that baby boomers hit the age of 60. I say that because we're on the verge of this great generational wealth transfer. As the baby boom generation begins to exit the workforce and retire, and they're selling businesses, the reality is there's going to be a glut of businesses that are going to be available for sale. Now, why I feel like this is very important to mention is we've seen those numbers, just the length of time to get the business ready to sell, just the number of, really the percentage of sales that fall through. And again, the 9 months with the M&A transaction, that is assuming that, the first buyer works out. You may actually have somebody come in, the due diligence causes things to fall apart, and you may look at the due diligence and decide, okay, we may need to make a couple of other fixes. So you take all of that and then combine it with the fact that we're going to have so many businesses over the next decade that are going to be going for sale, for lack of a better phrase. You're going to need every advantage that you can get. And I say it, there are going to be probably some businesses out there that if they had been sold just a few years earlier, they might have been worth more just because the competition's going to be a lot stronger. And, you're going to be in a competitive space where people are going to have their pick. They're going to look at it and say, okay, well, I like this and this, but, like maybe the EBITDA, it's a little lower than this company, or I like the cash position of this better, or might be, okay, I like just how lean operationally this company. I mean, I don't know what all buyers are thinking. They're all thinking about different things, but the reality is it is going to be very much a buyer's market in the coming years, and just getting as much in your favor as possible is going to be what's going to help you.
Very good point. I think one of the hardest things to wrestle with in your mind is it might not be the best time for you to exit the business, but it might be the right time anyway. And that's hard to grapple with, because if you looked out, and again, if you got your 5-year plan and you've done that forecasting with your financials and you got a little plan moving forward for 5 years and what that outlook would look like, you might already be focusing on this, but it's like, look around, just take a minute, stop and look up, look around and say, in the next 5 years, where do I see my business, my practice as a doctor? Where do I see that? And is it the time now, or when I'm ready, it might not be the right time? So those are hard decisions for sure. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's going to be a flood. There was 10,000 people a day turning 65 for quite a long time, but now we're coming to the edge of that. And we've seen this coming down the pike demographically for decades. You can almost predict it. And that's a great point about it being a buyer's market moving forward. Any final thoughts? This has been a great discussion with you. It seems like time's flying talking to you here today. But any final thoughts or anything that you would like to talk to the doctors about, or offers or anything?
Well, really the final thoughts that I have on this, it really comes down to the fact, do not delay. Just really get the ball rolling as soon as possible. And I think of another elderly couple who I view as mentors, who actually passed away recently. My youngest son is actually named after him, just so you can get an idea about just the connection that I have with him. But I knew them for decades. And even after I had left college, I was actually living in the same town as they did for many years. I would go over. They had trouble getting around, so I had no problem if a light needed to be replaced or a filter needed to be replaced in the furnace. Anytime they needed something, they just pick up the phone and ask. I'd try to be over there in 10, 15 minutes. The problem was, as the years went on and they got more and more limited, they kept saying that, okay, well, as soon as we get older and we're not able to take care of ourselves, we'll go live with our older daughter. And time passed, and finally the day came where they needed to move out. And they were convinced, no, we're fine. We're not there yet, but there was no plan. And as a result, there was so much stuff that was done on the fly. They weren't able to really get the best care possible. And I was really kind of sad to see how things ended. The point I'm trying to make is this exit really is going to be something that's going to happen with everybody. If you die, you're going to exit your business. Or if you sell your business, you're going to exit it. In other words, unless you decide to liquidate the business before you die and before you retire, you're going to exit it. And over the years, I've talked with financial advisors, and they say you should start planning your exit when you start the business. And at first, I thought that seemed a little extreme, but now the more I look at it, the more I realize you need to do it, because just like an elderly couple who needs to be planning and thinking ahead to when they need assisted living care and additional needs to be met, we need to be thinking about this and just really never think that, okay, well, I'll put it off until a little bit later. Start thinking about it now.
That's a great point. Do it now. I still have this little desk thing. It looks like a little piece of stone that says you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. And then it says, do it now. I've carried that with me my entire career. Probably the financial advisors that you were talking to, one of the big things that we tell clients is know your exit strategy when you get into something. You know, if you're investing in a stock, well, what's your exit? So maybe that's where that came from too. There's a lot of truth in that. And if you got 25 to 30 years left to go in your business, phew, we caught you just in time. It's one of those kind of moments. So Dr. Evan Duke, I appreciate you today. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Physician Wealth Meds, we do appreciate everything that you're doing with us today. So thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks. That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors.